It seems like the Formula One world is a place that just keeps on giving. And after the latest rumor that Aramco, one of the greatest names in the sport financially wise and the title partner of Aston Martin, is ready to complete a buyout of the Silverstone-based squad, they've made some solid promises about signing two of the highest profile F1 personnel possible, Verstappen and Newey. But if this plan goes through, what is in there for the current Red Bull employees? And more importantly, is this the beginning of the downfall of the Austrian squad after Wolff's latest statement regarding Horner remaining in charge? Aramco, the current title sponsor of Aston Martin, is ready to complete a full buyout, or at least a controlling stake from Lawrence Stroll, in order to be more involved in the sport. Obviously, there's a huge interest in the sport in the countries from the Middle East, especially after their financial impact on the majority of the teams, but Aramco does not play games. They want to bring in Verstappen and Newey right away and make a championship-winning squad from day one. The report states that the Saudi Arabian oil company is ready to give both Newey and Verstappen a blank check in order to secure their signatures, something that Ferrari was prepared to do as well and might be beaten by the newcomers in the sport. Before you jump and talk about the budget cap, let us remind you that the top 3 paid employees in the team are excluded from this sacred financial rule, so that does not prevent Aramco from giving hundreds of millions of dollars to both Newey and Verstappen in order to secure their signatures. The question is, what needs to happen in order for us to see this scenario become a reality? For starters, Aramco needs to complete the buyout that they have been constantly pursuing for the past couple of months, and the latest actions of Lawrence Stroll point exactly towards this trend. The Canadian billionaire sold a minor stake to the American company Arctos Partner back in November, and he could be open to selling the entire team, or at least a controlling share, to their current partners, Aramco. The oil company has been reportedly very busy pursuing Lawrence Stroll towards making this scenario happen during the Saudi Arabian GP, as it was the ideal ground to confidently approach some very high-profile figures. It's worth mentioning that Aramco has a very big influence in the sport, as they've been a strongly committed partner to Formula One since 2020, which was one of the most crucial seasons for the sport due to the global pandemic. When reporting about this matter, Formula.Uno, the media that shocked the F1 world first with these news, wrote, Aramco analyzed the feasibility of making certain moves and gave blank checks for future engagements in due course. In this context, Red Bull's heavyweights are in their sights. These include the triple world champion Max Verstappen and the engineering genius Adrian Newey. The fact that these two are seen as feasible targets show much has changed in recent months. Formula One's budget cap excluded the salaries of the 3 most senior figures in the team and, of course, the drivers as well. Unfortunately for Red Bull, they cannot stop the issues in the team, even though the high-profile figures in Marco, Horner and Jos Verstappen sat at one table and agreed to ceasefire in order to focus on what is most important, winning races. However, the opinion of the Verstappen camp remains the same. As long as Horner remains the leader of the team, there will be unrest, and where there's unrest, there's massive potential for superstars to leave and prove to everyone that they can do much better in other environments as well, even though they might not have the greatest need to do so in the moment. What we must not forget is that 2026 is right around the corner, and the general belief is that apart from Ferrari and Mercedes, the partnership between Aston Martin and Honda is also poised to make a lot of challenge for the rest of the F1 grid, given the fact that Honda isn't a rookie in building engines in the sport. Quite the contrary, they are considered pioneers and a very experienced manufacturer that has the potential to give a midfield team some championship-winning experience. If you add the fact that Verstappen has a lot of faith in Honda and the reliability of their engines, something that has improved massively in the past couple of years, it's safe to assume that he would consider this a very important factor for his future in Formula One. Even though he stated that there's no reason for him to leave Red Bull at this point, Max pointed towards Lewis's move to Ferrari and said that you can never say never to a certain move in his career. And after these rumors, now we can understand why Red Bull wants to ceasefire and to stop the civil war for a certain period. According to Formula.Uno, the Honda factor will have a huge influence on Max's decision, as the portal went on to write. The Honda move to Aston Martin gives the Silverstone-based squad the support of a manufacturer, a fundamental ingredient for winning in F1. From the perspective of Max Verstappen's team, the presence of Honda can only be positive. On the other hand, Red Bull is entering the sport as rookies on paper, as it would be the first fully independent season with their powertrain division that will be badged by Ford. Of course, this is also a new era that could go one way or another, but considering the experience that Honda has in the sport, we might be looking at a more favored team in terms of competitiveness here from 2026 onwards. However, we do know that if Verstappen decides to leave the team, whether that be with Marco or with Newey, we can never exclude the opportunity he will have in Mercedes. Yes, the Silver Arrows are currently struggling with their design and philosophy of the car, and the fact that Hamilton left them for Ferrari could push Verstappen to think in another direction, but given the engine supremacy Mercedes has over the rest of the grid, you can never say no to this move. Obviously, Wolff has been making strides in trying to sign both Marco and Verstappen, jokingly saying that the doors for the 80-year-old are wide open and he can be the next Niki Lauda without the red hat, but that has been swiftly denied by Marco. Now, it's evident that they will reconsider this decision because of all the latest developments in Red Bull, and when talking about the 2025 seat in both Mercedes and Red Bull, Wolff went on to say, "If Christian Horner remains in command at Red Bull, anything is possible." Yet, Wolff has also realized the situation in which his team is currently in. They're struggling to build a solid platform and bring upgrades to their car, and the last thing that would attract Verstappen is a team that has failed to be competitive in 3 consecutive seasons after being dominant for 8 straight campaigns in the turbo hybrid era. Be that as it may, Wolff himself said that it's up to Mercedes to prove that they have the best car on the grid, or can have the best car on the grid from 2026 onwards, in order to lure Verstappen and as much of the high-profile staff as possible. However, what needs to be emphasized is that Verstappen will have to fight George Russell, who, although said to be more than open to having the Dutchman as his teammate, given the fact that he drove with the 7-time world champion for 2 years, will definitely face a much bigger challenge once the 3-time world champion steps foot in Mercedes. And this could be a scenario that Max would want to avoid, even though he's definitely not afraid of some internal competition and taking over a role from a driver. What is far more important is the future of both teams Max is looking at as his potential next destination. Even though Aston Martin is struggling right now, they do have a solid platform to build on, and they're becoming more and more independent from Mercedes, with 2026 poised to be a fully independent season for the Silverstone-based squad. On the other hand, while the glory and greatness of Mercedes are not to be messed with, the Silver Arrows are in huge danger of falling back in the pecking order and being a less attractive market for drivers of Max's caliber, and that itself goes to show that we might be looking at the current 3-time world champion in a green suit sooner rather than later. Of course, as of now, things remain the same, and Verstappen is still a driver for Red Bull, along with Newey being the chief technical officer of the Austrian team, but the most important thing is that the future might not be that bright for this team after all. The internal drama, as well as the reports that Horner is pushing towards a higher role in Red Bull despite the ongoing stuff with the team, go to show that as a driver and employee, if you cannot solve the issue in the team, then you would be much better in another place. Now, without Verstappen and Newey, the Austrian team is losing a huge amount of value, both in experience and marketing, and it would be a huge challenge for them to overcome the issue that would be poised upon them. It doesn't help that the Thai-backed Chalem Uvidia sent a family member as a spy in order to control Horner's behavior, further showing that even the owner of 51% of the team might not have full trust in the actions of the 50-year-old Brit. With all this in mind, do you think that Verstappen and Newey would go to Aston Martin? And more importantly, do you think that this has the potential to bring Red Bull back to the chasing role instead of them being the chase team on the grid? Let us know in the comments below.